Hello, my quilting friends. Leah Day here with episode 43 of the podcast. And today I'm chatting with my friend Christa Watson. Christa is an awesome quilting teacher. She has written several new books. She's just designed a new line of fabric. And we're going to be chatting today about piecing and quilting with pre-cut fabrics. That's the topic of Christa's latest book. So I hope you're looking forward to this episode and getting to know Christa. I gotta say, after chatting with Christa and I just listened to the podcast episode again, the interview with her again, she's just so energetic and just makes me feel good to talk with her. It makes me feel like, I don't know, I guess I just got another dose of energy today re-listening to that episode. So I hope that you find it the same way. Really, more than anything else, I just find her to be such an encouraging, supportive person, and that's wonderful to have a friend like that. So a few updates about what's going on around the house. Today I am stitching on my little gingerbread needlepoint. So this is a painted canvas that I bought and I am stitching it. It's a very old project. I have it written here, Leah Day 2013. That's when I started it. So I'm hoping that I can finish it up now in 2018 and change that 3 to an 8 really easily. So if you would like to see a picture of this, come and check out the show notes. Of course, we also have the podcast available in videos too on YouTube. So if you'd like to also see me talking and what I'm working on and see me stitching, then definitely come and check out the videos on YouTube as well. So this is what I'm working on right now, and this is kind of my little evening project, and I gotta say, this is taking a lot more time than I expected. The speed, I think, that I had stitched out my little Express Your Love embroidery, that went a lot faster, and I think the main reason was it was not cross-stitch, stitching over a stitch and then stitching back on top of itself. I think that's where I'm losing a lot of speed because this is just really slow. And there's so many color changes too. There's dozens of little gumdrops and each one is like a different color. So I think that's a lot of it as well. But yeah, I always try and have a little handwork project to work on in the evening while we're watching a show. We're still working our way through Star Trek, Next Generation. And that's been a lot of fun. James is enjoying it. Josh is enjoying it too. So that's been nice that we have something we can all enjoy and watch together. And then I'm mostly just focusing on trying to get this long-term unfinished project done. And that's kind of been the theme for the last week, is just going back and looking at things that have been undone or unfinished and trying to get them cleaned up and ready to go. So something that I pulled out this week that was, kind of an unfinished project that needed some work was the quilt behind me. So that is Winter Wonderland, is the beautiful wall-hanging quilt behind me. You can come and see a picture of it in the show notes, of course, as well. And so this quilt was very unique. I made it and designed it to test a technique that I call reverse shadow trapunto. And I created a quilt pattern that was available on the website for many years. And then whenever we had that big website, switcheroo in 2015, I took it down because I felt like, it had kind of gotten a little dated. It was a little outdated. It wasn't in line with the rest of the products on our site. I really wanted to revamp it to double check my math because I got to say my ability to calculate the amount of fabric required for any project has definitely improved over the years. So I just kind of pulled it down, but I never did anything with it. I never fixed it, never put it back up. And it was a really popular pattern, especially this time of the year. It's really fun to play around with snowflakes, right? And it was a really fun technique too. Reverse shadow trapunto it's a show-winning technique. I won a major award at an AQS show with that quilt too. So it's something that I really need to get done. I need to get it back on the site and get it back where people can be able to make it too. So that's what I've been working on this week. Just going back through that pattern, and I originally wrote that pattern in Works, Microsoft Works, which is now a defunct program. So I couldn't even open the original document, which is really, really frustrating. So couldn't even open that. So I had to retype out all of the text. So went through and did all of that, and then ultimately decided to scrap most of it because it was not the best writing, to be honest. Really not the best writing, and that's okay. It's just, it's one of those things that I think comes with time. It's just, appreciating how far you've come and how much of a better writer that I am now. And I'm able to see that, and that's really, really nice, because I'm able to see like, wow, I really didn't have a handle on describing the steps of this. I did it the best I could at the time, but I have written so many more patterns now since 2010 that I have kind of a different system and a different way of writing and describing things. Also, I have created Excel files to help me calculate fabric, so I can really quickly and easily calculate yardage and get that dead on and accurate. The one thing, there's a lot of bias binding in this quilt, and so something that I'm going to need to update my fabric calculator is to figure out how to calculate the amount required for bias binding. So it's kind of a little bit of a challenge, and I'll certainly actually probably pull that out and cut it fresh just to double check it. Just going ahead and prep up some fabric, cut some bias binding, and make sure that I'm right. So really going through all of that was it was a nice little, what's the word? Almost a time capsule of how I would write something in 2010, and then now 8 years later, how I would write it now. And I found that really cool. So be looking forward to this new quilt pattern and tutorial coming soon to leahday.com, and you can make the Winter Wonderland quilt too. Now for an update about the machine quilting party, this week we took all of those rainbow log cabin blocks and pieced them together to create the rainbow log cabin quilt top. And next week we're going to start quilting. So in the space of a week or so, you need to piece all the blocks together to make the top and get it basted. So remember, we came out with a new workshop last week, the Basting Basics workshop. So if you're struggling with basting, if it's just basically a big giant question mark for you and you really don't know how to do it, definitely come and check out this workshop at leahday.com/baste, and you can learn a lot more about this process. I go into a lot of detail about quilt battings and how important that choice is. And honestly, creating this workshop, I didn't realize just how much I had to say about batting, and it ended up being, quite a few videos just about that choice and how to test it and how to know what you're going to get when you put a particular batting in the middle of a quilt. And really, honestly, the entire finished look of a quilt is dependent upon the batting. So it really is a very important choice. So I hope you'll come and check out that new workshop and learn more about basting, and then of course come and check out the video and learn how to make your rainbow log cabin quilts. Every Friday we're sharing a new walking foot design, and so this last Friday we shared a video on how to quilt crazy lines, which is really a perfect second design for this quilt along, because it's basically straight lines only stitched in random directions. It's very, very easy. And the thing that I really love to see is just how easily everyone is getting into walking foot quilting. Free motion quilting, what I've taught in years past, and I've taught it over and over and over again, and every single time I have seen people struggle with those beginning first ugly stitches. It seems like with free motion quilting, there's no way around it. Your stitches are just going to be ugly for a little while at least, until you kind of break through that beginning hurdle. With walking foot quilting, we don't have that at all. The walking foot feeds the fabric, it takes care of that, it keeps the stitches even, and that's what I love about it. I fell in love with it because it was just so much easier to do and so much easier to teach. It is a little slower, but hey, I'll take slower any day if it's also easier, and that makes it better. So come and check out all of those videos that we have for the machine quilting party, and remember that you can join in anytime. You don't have to be working on it right this second. The videos stay up forever, and you can find all of them linked up together at leahday.com/2018 party. So that's pretty much it for what's going on around the house. Running a quilt along is a really big deal, and that's pretty much all I have time for right now. I'm hoping to get more videos shot, sharing some long arm tutorials as well. it's just one of those things. I just have so many hours in a day, and I'm hoping to be able to get to more, but I'm also really enjoying this winter time. I'm hoping we get some snow this week. That would be marvelous, and be able to spend some time with my family sledding. So it's kind of one of those things. I guess my challenge for this week is just accepting how much I can get done. And sometimes that's not as much as I expected or not as much as I'd like, but accepting that. And that's where I'm at right now, and we get as much as we can done and enjoy the process. And I think that's really the key. So that's it for the updates for this week. Check out the new Basting Basics workshop at leahday.com/baste. And of course, join in the quilt along by picking up a new copy of my book, Explore Walking Foot Quilting with Leah Day. And you can find that at leahday.com/walkingfoot. So now it's time to meet Christa Watson and learn all about piecing with pre-cuts. Hello, my quilting friends. Leah Day here with my friend Christa Watson. Welcome to the show, Christa.
Hey, Leah, it's great to be here and chat with you. You're always so fun.
Thank you. Now, a little introduction. Christa loves teaching others to successfully quilt on their home sewing machines, like me, and she especially loves making modern quilts. She is the author of Machine Quilting with Style, The Ultimate Guide to Machine Quilting, and her newest book, Piece and Quilt with Precuts. She also just recently came out with a fabric line called Modern Marks and has a few craftsy classes as well. So we've got a lot to talk about today. So the first thing I want to ask, I'm curious, what's on your sewing machine right now? What are you working on today?
Okay, well, let's see. Actually, it's kind of empty because I just finished up a bunch of projects, but that's a tricky question. You know, when I sew, it's like crazy town. It's like, oh my gosh, finish these 10 things, and then like I don't touch it for like 3 days. So I just finished up a bunch of deadline stuff, and so I have to now I have to pick and choose what I want to work on next. It's kind of crazy. I'm not one of those that can have like a lot of works in progress. I'll do like 4 or 5 if they're for a deadline, and then I have to stop, and then I have to like rejigger, and I have to like then plan out like the next 2 months of quilting. So I'm kind of in a dead zone right now, which in a way is kind of nice because it gives me a little bit of a break before it gets crazy again.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of that is probably secret sewing too, because you're doing craftsy classes and more books, I think, right? So some of that you can't even talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've really kind of had to strike a balance between like what can I share and what can I not share, because I'm a sharer like you are. Like I love to tell everybody everything and behind the scenes, but like if I'm working on a project that's not going to come out for 6 months to a year, even if I show sneak peeks, it's kind of a disappointment. People are like, well, what are you doing? I can't see it. And then what I'm trying to do nowadays is I'm trying to take like a whole bunch of pictures while I'm making stuff. And then once that thing comes out in the world, like my next fabric, my next class, my next all that stuff, then I want to go back and then share, oh, here's what I was working on 6 months ago, but now I can share it in depth. So I'm trying to do a little bit more of that this year.
It is pretty hard to do that. I have been in that situation myself, and it's almost like you have to put your excitement in a bottle and cap it, and then ship it to yourself in the future, and then uncap it and be like, yay, party time. But it's really hard.
Yeah, like a time capsule of enthusiasm. That's awesome.
Yeah, something like that. It's tough. So what we're going to talk about today, I want to talk about your new book, Piecing and Quilting with Precut. So let's talk about that. First off, what is your favorite precut? What's the one that you like to use the most?
Well, the one that I like, that a lot of people don't really necessarily qualify it as a precut, is fat quarters. I love working with fat quarters because they allow you to have like a really good amount of fabric. Fat quarters, of course, is 1/4 yard of fabric, but instead of it being cut 9 by 44, which is like skinny, it's cut 18 by 22. So it makes it a nice like rectangle size to work with. And I like them because unlike the other precuts, which you cannot pre-wash, you can pre-wash fat quarters if you're careful, and you can cut them into any size. So while I love working with the 5-inch squares, the 10-inch squares, the 2.5-inch strips, the funky looking shapes, fat quarters are my favorite because I think they're the most versatile.
I completely agree. I have managed to wash a fat 1/8, and that's like the half size of a fat quarter, but that ended up a little bit garbled. So I agree with you. Fat quarters are the way to go because you just get so much more fabric with that cut.
Exactly. And I got a couple of like mesh laundry bags that have like a little drawstring, and so whenever I wash them, I'll throw them in there because then they won't get so tangled up and you don't lose so much fabric.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit about cutting and planning quilts with pre-cuts. The struggle that I've always had when, you know, kind of like I don't have the pre-cut in front of me to plan something. I'm just kind of going, oh, hey, maybe I'll make this pattern pre-cut friendly, kind of as an afterthought, has always been, well, wow, that came out as a really weird size, or I need like, you know, 31 pre-cuts and they come in packs of 40, you know, like weird stuff like that. Do you worry about that kind of thing? Does that go in your calculation at all, or do you just kind of wing it?
I do kind of a combination of all of that. So the first thing I'm going to do, like if I have an idea, I'm going to say, okay, if I have this design idea, you know, I design everything in electric quilt software, and so it's really easy to change sizes. I'll say, how will this work out? And so I play a lot with the math. I try to figure out, will it work best from a 5-inch square or a 10-inch square or 2.5-inch strip? And once I kind of get the math right, then I have to tweak the size. For example, there's often been times where I want to come up with a, you know, a design like out of jelly rolls, you know, 2.5-inch strips, and it needs like 41 strips. So then I have to go back to the drawing board and figure out, okay, most packs only come with 40. So what I try to do is I try to make the math work out. And especially what I've really noticed now that I've actually become a fabric designer myself is that a lot of times you'll have fabrics in the bundle that won't necessarily work because they're like super, super light. And so then you have to take them out. So what I've started trying to do is design stuff where maybe it doesn't use like 40 strips, but maybe it uses like 38 or 36. And so if you have those 2 or 3 strips left over, you can just throw them into your scrap pile. Or in fact, in my book, I actually have a couple quilts that are made from scraps, so you can actually use your leftover pre-cuts in them. But I think, yeah, you were asking about cutting. The nice thing that's working with pre-cuts is that a lot of the cutting is done for you. And so, especially when I've taught like beginner quilting, and I know you taught beginners and done really well with that, like a lot of times they have a hard time cutting a straight strip. So working with things that are already cut out, it's like already taken out half the work, and then you can get to the quilting, you know, a lot faster, which, you know, you and I, that's kind of our favorite part anyway, so it works out well. Exactly.
The one struggle with pre-cuts though, like especially if you're using, do you use the pinked edge? The pinked edge is like the zigzaggy edge on certain pre-cuts. Some of them have them, some of them don't. They drive me nuts. So what's your feeling about the pinked edge?
I know. So what you have to do is you have to measure it, because let's say, again, for example, you know, if you're working with the jelly roll, or in my case, Benartex, my fabric company, they call them pinwheels, and they're known by all sorts of fun little names. You have to measure the edge. And so is the pinked edge from edge to edge, is that 2.5? Or is the valley where the pinked edge goes down into it, is that 2.5? So once you kind of figure that out, it's going to be the same way in the whatever pre-cut you're using, and it's also going to be the same way with all that manufacturer's pre-cuts, because they use the same factories and facilities to cut them. So once you determine that, you can figure it out. And so most of the time, what I have found is I just use the entire edge, like edge to edge, and it works out fine. If for some reason you have a pre-cut where it's like has a funky measurement, like it's, you know, maybe not exactly 2.5, then what you can do is you can either trim it, or you can kind of fudge it. You know, like let's say it's a little smaller than 2.5. Well, then what you can do is instead of using a 1/4-inch seam, you can line it up with your piece that you're going to sew, and then kind of scooch it over a little bit. And so maybe the pre-cut edge has a little bit of a smaller seam, and you can kind of eyeball it sometimes too.
Yeah. That sounds like, you know, just a little bit of kind of fudging it is the best word to use for that kind of thing. And, you know, even still, there are always going to be those kinds of quilters that really want it to come out perfect. What's your advice for them?
I would say loosen up. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm just teasing. You can, like I said, you can fudge the seams if you want to. You can always make your blocks and make your units, and then you can trim them down. Like a lot of times, I know it kind of sounds counterintuitive, because you're like, well, you want to save all this time, you know. The way I look at it is you can either save time, or you can take time to be accurate. So a lot of times I'll make my pieces oversized and then trim them down, and then I'll know they're exact same size. Or let's say, for example, you're doing a block out of pre-cuts, and I'm just pulling out numbers. Let's say it's supposed to be like 8.5 inches from one edge to the other, and let's say it shrinks down to like 8.25. Well, if all of your blocks shrink down consistently, then it's not a big deal. It'll still work. You know, your math would just be based on that smaller size rather than the larger size.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's what I usually do. I will piece big and trim square. You know, it's where like I don't even care if the edges even come together properly, because we're going to cut it down to be right. Or just slap on some extra strips around it and then trim that up. Something like that. I think that works really, really well. So let's talk about quilting. I know that you are a fan of basting with spray basting. Am I right? You want to talk us through that?
Yes. And in fact, I just wrote up this really great blog tutorial, which I'll send you the email because by the time this goes live, it will have already been posted. Anyway, I wrote up this blog tutorial showing a step-by-step how I do basting spray. And that basically came about with, I just tried all sorts of different methods, and I finally found one that works for me. And so just a quick little shout out, what I love, and I know you do this too, is I recommend that people try out a million different ways to do something. Once they find their 1 or 2 or 3 ways that they like, then go for it. Even if your best friend does something different or your quilt teacher does something different, once you find a method that works for you, stick with it because you'll be so much happier in the end.
Yes, completely. And you do spray basting outside, is that right?
What I do, and I'll give you kind of the quick overview, and then like I said, I have a tutorial that has like all the step-by-step. So what I do is I just take a sheet, and I just put a sheet on the ground, and I spray outside. And I actually spray the top and the backing. I don't spray the batting. And what I think, a lot of times the manufacturer's instructions will say, oh, spray the batting on both sides. Well, number one, that ends up using more spray because it sinks in, which I think that's the point. They want you to use more spray. And also, if you've got the spray on both sides of the batting, then it's kind of hard to manipulate and hard to deal with when you're moving it. So I spray the top and the backing separately outside on the ground, just using a sheet to protect the ground. Easy peasy. Then I take the layers inside and then I assemble them on my design wall. So I use a combination of outside and inside, and it works out really, really well because I can get so close up to it. I can get like an inch away from it and I can touch it rather than having to lean over if I'm basting like on a table or the floor. So it saves my back.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that sheet that you use for the overspray, does that wash out just with soap and water in the washing machine?
Yeah, exactly. It's just a sheet, you know, so I don't really make any quilts that are bigger than queen size because I have a queen size bed. And so like I buy a king size sheet. And so just a flat sheet, king size, throw it on the ground and it's fine. And then, and then I just throw it in the wash. No big deal. Easy peasy.
Yeah, spray basting, it's one of those, it's on my list to try it, but, you know, it's kind of like you kind of get stuck in your own methods. And just like you said, I figured out what works and I stick with it. So I completely agree with that. It is definitely something to try, and I know that that works really well for a lot of quilters. So let's talk about quilting. This is our favorite thing. Any special considerations for quilting a pre-cut made quilt?
Well, the one thing, and I know you're a big fan of this because I was listening to this on your previous episodes, I normally like to pre-wash and starch my fabric. I'm a big advocate of that. However, when it comes to pre-cuts, you can't do that. You can't pre-wash them because they'll shrink up, and you can starch them, but it's kind of harder to do. So what I will do is, like, when the quilt top is all done, I'll give it a nice starch, and like the backing, I'll give it a nice starch. So you just have to realize that as you're working with the pre-cut shapes, they're going to stretch out a little more. So I actually use pins. That's another thing where I know a lot of people don't use pins. I love pins. They are my friends. So I will pin all of my intersections, all of my seams, and that way, even if I'm like sewing together 2 squares that are the same size, sometimes just the pressure can cause one of them to kind of like, you know, feed through uneven during your machine. So as long as I use pins, then I make sure that I'm not adding any stretch when I'm sewing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it was interesting. I got a lot of response from that pre-washing episode. This is a previous episode of the podcast. And there are some die-hard pre-washers out there that will even pre-wash pre-cuts. They put them in the lingerie bags.
Yeah, that's true. You can do that. I mean, they might still shrink up, but then maybe use, like if you have a 5-inch pre-cut square, then maybe your design is based on 4 inches, you know, and it shrinks up and no big deal. But yeah, that's true. You can definitely do that as well. I tried and it didn't turn out so well. So I just make sure, you know, because a lot of times it can bleed. So I make sure that any quilts made from pre-cuts, like I wash them with color catchers at the end to make sure that they're not going to bleed or anything like that.
Yeah, well, I was talking to a friend just recently, and she was making some quilts for a book, and they actually did not want the quilts to be washed. So is that something that you're experiencing, you know, as you're making quilts and writing books and stuff?
Yeah, so let me clarify. So what I do, it's kind of funny. I call these quilts my working girls, you know. I make all these quilts and I send them out to quilt shows and I send them off to books and magazines and all that kind of stuff. But I don't wash them until they're done because for photography, they want them to be flat and clean, and they don't want that kind of shriveled up look, that kind of used look. So what I do is once they've done for photography, once they're done being on tour, you know, for about a year or 2, then I take them at home and then I wash them at that time. And then I snuggle up with them and use them. Because, I mean, a lot of people really love that look, but I agree with you. A lot of my publishers, they recommend don't wash your quilt until after it's been photographed.
Huh. I think that's so interesting. And it's something that you wouldn't even think about. Like, my first step usually after finishing a quilt is to go throw it in the washing machine or soak it and then block it. So that's really interesting. So let's talk about your fabric.
Yes.
Krista,
oh, my favorite thing.
Yes, modern marks. So you sent me a huge supply of back quarters, and thank you so much for that. I am still dying to dig my fingers in those and make something pretty. It is such a cheerful, bright, fun line. Why don't you tell people about the process of designing it?
Okay, well, first of all, what I have to say, and I always tell this when anybody ever asks me about this, if you have a goal where you want to do something, like, go out and do it. And don't let not knowing what the heck you're doing stop you. So kind of the quick backstory is I knew I always wanted to design fabric. You know, I wanted to try all the things and see what I like and see what I didn't like. And incidentally, I love designing fabric, but I was always scared because I don't have the technical skills. You know, I don't have the InDesign and Illustrator. I don't have all that skill. So I thought, oh my gosh, I can never design fabric. Well, I'm here to tell you that is absolutely not true. Like, people design fabric a million different ways. And so what I did is I draw all my designs on paper, and I sketch them out, and I try to color them with colored pencils and get close to what I want. Then I give it to the fabric company, and they take my sketches and they put them in the computer, and they can put them into repeat, and they can help me resize them, and you know, we can go back and forth, and we can recolor them and things like that. And so having them do the technical aspect of it, where I get to do the creative aspect of it, like, that has opened up a whole new world. And it's kind of funny because really it's that way when I do books and patterns as well. You know, I design all my book patterns and my quilt patterns in EQ, but then, and I write it out, but then I give that to my graphic designer, or I give that to my book publisher, and they make it look pretty. So it's very similar with fabric. I design it, I have the vision, I get the rough draft going, and then they help me fine tune it and make it look pretty. And I'm so happy about that. Otherwise, I never would have gotten past square one.
Yeah, I think it comes in all different shapes and sizes. You know, it really is something that, I guess the moral is, like, don't be intimidated by all the different ways that you could design fabric. Stick with the simplest method and then find people to help you, right?
Exactly. And just like, you know, you and I, we love doing our own quilting, and we love putting those finishing stitches, but not everybody loves to do the quilting. And so in the industry, you know, whether you're quilting or piecing or fabric or whatever, like, there's something for everyone, and you can pick and choose the parts of the quilting process that you like. And, you know, many people are just as happy to give it off and let someone else do the quilting for them, and they just want to do the piecing. Well, same thing here. I can do the fabric designing, and I can finalize the designs, but I don't have to do all the technical work. And then it's kind of like we have to get over that idea that we have to do every single step of every little thing ourselves. When we get help, it just makes the process a much easier. So I love the fact that that can apply to fabric design as well as quilt making.
Yeah, I need to learn that lesson. as I take on more layers of bookmaking myself, you know.
You want to try it yourself. I mean, that's so awesome. Like, you and I mean, we both love writing books and love quilting, but you and I have talked about this. Like, I would never self-publish my own book, but I love the fact that you are. And I'm like, man, Leah, you are like my hero, you know?
You know, but at the same time, though, you know, I look at how productive you've been and how fast everything has happened for you. Like, Krista, just so everybody knows, those 3 books came out sequentially, like, one after each other in, like, there was like 6 months or a year between each book.
Oh, God, yeah, they're almost like Irish twins. It was like, one came out in 2015, 2016, 2017. Then I did 2 craftsy classes. Then I did fabric. So I'm taking just a little bit of a breather from book writing. But once I get caught up on the other stuff, I have, of course, like 5 million more ideas. I've got to sit down later this year and work on my next book proposal. But yeah, it's, you know, you just have to throw stuff on the wall and see what sticks and see what you like, you know?
Completely. And the number one thing that I have always come back to is it's never going to be the one book, the big giant bestseller. Like, we, you know, kind of how it works in the quilting industry is continually coming out with new content. You know, like, putting a whole lot of effort and time into a single project. You know, yes, that's wonderful. And yes, we all try and do our best, but, you know, it's pretty much like kind of a 2-year thing. If you don't have something new out within about 2 years, yeah, people start to forget about you a little bit.
Exactly, it is. And what's so funny that you said that, because I just had this like other epiphany, like I wrote up this like blog post about how I really decided what I need to spend my time on and what I don't need to spend my time on. And just like you feel like you have to do everything, and you have to keep putting out content, I was getting overwhelmed with social media. I was getting overwhelmed with like, oh my gosh, I have to have Facebook and Instagram and this and that and Pinterest and Twitter and blah, blah, blah. And it got to the point where it was getting me burned out. And so I stopped, I took some time, I focused, and I said, you know what, I'm going to cut back. I'm going to do the things that I enjoy, my blog, Instagram, my Facebook group, and I'm going to let go of everything else because as productive as I am, or people like say, oh, do you sleep, whatever. I want to spend my time quilting and designing. I don't want to spend my time pinning and social media and sending out newsletters every 3 days. That's not my thing. But it took me a while to figure that out because I did feel like I have to do everything. And fortunately, I realized I don't. It's okay.
I'm completely with you. I've actually pulled back on blog post writing. I find that I can actually put up a video like in half the time that it takes me to write the text of the blog post. Like I can just publish the video and not have a blog post to go along with it. And I know that sounds like sacrilegious or something, and it took me a little while to give myself permission to just post to YouTube and not, also put it on the blog. And, and I just had to be real with it and say, sometimes that adds another 45 minutes, another hour to the whole process. And I've got to go find good photos, and then I've got to go tag them and all that kind of good stuff. I'm really happy to hear that you also had a situation where you had to just say, I can't do that as much. And that definitely makes sense. So what are some other tips, things that you're kind of like, oh, maybe I'll try that again, or, things that you might have decided that you won't try again going forward?
Well, again, this is what's awesome, and this is where I have to tell you, I love that you have all these videos, because, when I go around and I teach and people want to, like, see videos and stuff, I'm like, oh, go check out Leah Day. She's got great videos, because I don't do YouTube. That's one of the things where, again, I felt like, oh my gosh, everybody and their mother's doing YouTube, but I never got into it. I don't have again, it's that technical. I don't have the technical skill to do that. And so at the beginning of 2017, my goal was to do YouTube. And at the end of 2017, I said, you know what? I'm not going to do that. And so being okay with that. But what I realized is I still am going to do video. I'm just not going to do them. I'm going to do Craftsy. So like I'm actually working on my third Craftsy class. But again, making that decision, deciding, you know what? Do I want to go A or B? Do I want to do it myself? Do it with someone else? And again, just stressing it's okay, because everyone's path to success is different. And if you try to copy someone else and do something what someone else does, you're going to get so frustrated and you're not going to find joy. And so, I don't know, how everybody like has their word of the year? Mine is like simplify and have joy in the new year.
Awesome. Yeah, my word for 2018 is challenge. I don't know exactly what that's going to bring, but, it definitely, I've been, kind of challenging the voices in my head and challenging myself to do more great work. So this is something that I've been talking about a lot. Great work is soul-fulfilling work that feels like it's more than just like working for a paycheck. It is something that like, this is why you were put on the earth to do this thing. So what is your great work, and what are you working on now that would count as that?
I love that. I love that philosophy, because I agree with you. Like you and I, we both do this full time. This is our job. And it's very easy to get caught up in the work part of it and not find the joy. So two things have kind of come into play. I just finished up a quilt for QuiltCon, which really I felt is one of the best pieces I've ever done. And of course, we're recording this before I find out whether or not I get into QuiltCon. And even if I don't, that's fine. The quilt was not for anything, and it was wonderful. It wasn't to be for a, magazine or in a book or anything. It was just to make it, and I enjoyed it. So just the fact of making something you want to try. And the other thing that was wonderful about it is because I wasn't trying to turn it into a tutorial or turn it into anything, I could explore concepts that did or didn't work, and I could do things in different ways because I didn't feel like I had to capture it and record it. So that's number one, is just doing work that fulfills you, making quilts that don't have to be for anything. And honestly, the second thing, kind of back to the fabric, when I first had the idea that I wanted to do fabric, I literally honestly thought, oh, this is just going to be one of those things I check off my list, I add to the bucket. I cannot believe how much I have enjoyed not only designing fabric and working with it, but it is so fulfilling to see other people work with my fabric. So I really do think that fabric is my great work, not so much to say, hey, look at me and look at all the patterns I'm designing, but fabric to me is so special because when I see somebody else take those raw materials and turn it into a unique design that I never would have thought of, I can't believe how satisfying that is to me. So I'm hoping, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that like the fabric continues to do well because I want to continue designing it, not to like make money off of it. I want to continue designing it because I want to see what other people do with it and get that satisfaction of them enjoying creativity. So that's a long sentence, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
No, thank you so much. I'd love to hear that. And, I completely agree. I think it's all about figuring out the direction that you need to go in and having the strength and the bravery. I mean, I would use the word bravery because there are times that I feel like I need to share, like this simple, easy pattern because there's a tutorial with it and I could do an ABC on that or 3 videos or whatever. And then there's this other project. It's like, that's tapping into my heart and what I really want to share. And I really want to see 50 million of these. Like, I really want to see like a whole lot of goddess quilts being made by other quilters. You know what I mean? So I
love those goddess quilts. Those are awesome.
I completely understand why you want to design fabric more. It's like seeing a piece of yourself but made by other people. That's wonderful.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, it's taken me, you've been in the industry for a while. I've been in the industry for a while, and it's taken years and years to figure out what works, what I like, and balancing, okay, what other people think I should do with what I think I should do with what can, put food on the table. And I mean, on the one hand, it's really fun. It can be stressful at times, but at the same time, when you hit that sweet spot, like with you, I love the fact that you're doing this like machine quilting series because not only are people going to love it, but also like you're enjoying doing that and like you have to get that out in the world. So I love that. I love chatting with you. I love talking shop. I love talking business. I love encouraging people. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I hope that your energy is so infectious. Every time I talk to Krista, like I feel 50 million times more energized. It's like, let's go conquer the world. Because you're like the absolute role model, I think, of energized, happy teachers out there teaching people how to quilt and do the quilts that they want to make. And I think we need more people like that, and open heart, sharing with an open heart more than anything else. So I could talk to you for like another hour, but this is the end. And I always ask everybody the same question. What are you most looking forward to in the next 5 years?
Well, one thing that's kind of will be fun. I mean, not that I'm looking forward to, but we're going to have a big change because my kids are all going to be out of the house in the next 5 years. My oldest one, he turns 21 and he's going off to college in January. My next one graduates high school next year. My daughter, she's 14, and so she'll be graduating and out of the house. And so just thinking about the changes that's going to be in our life, my husband, he travels with me occasionally, but I think when the kids are out of the house, we're probably going to travel more. We're going to go together. Personally, I just hope that I can continue to do what I love. I want to continue to write books. I want to continue to design fabric. I want to continue to reach people and just kind of maybe within 5 years get to that point where I have that balance where every day is satisfying and every day is fun and nothing stressful. I mean, I know that's a pipe dream, but yeah, I look forward to the changes. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun, but hopefully I'm involved in the modern quilt movement, and so it'll be interesting to see where that is in 5 years, and just to continue enjoying and making and having fun with it.
Absolutely. I completely agree. So why don't you share with everybody where they can find you online?
Okay, the best place is on my website at ChristaQuilts.com, and then I'm also on Instagram at Christa Quilts, and that's Christa with the CH, and then I also have a Facebook group that's just called Christa Quilts, where people can join, and the way I looked at it, just kind of tying this back into realizing and kind of finessing my social media, the way I look at my blog and my website is my headquarters where I share what I'm doing. And then my Facebook group is where I want people to share with me what they're doing. And then on Instagram, we can both share. People can tag me. I can see what they're doing. I can share what I'm doing. So by kind of having those defined roles and cutting out everything else, it's really great. But yeah, everywhere I'm Christa Quilts, and it's always fun to meet new friends and see what they're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, as always.
So that's it for this episode. If you'd like to find more episodes of the Hello My Quilting Friends podcast, check it out at leahday.com/podcast. We have a player that will play through all of the episodes shared so far, so you can binge listen for hours on end. Until next time, let's go quilt.